The summer sun shone bright over London. Hundreds of tourists gathered outside Buckingham Palace. They all wanted to see the famous royal guards in their red coats and tall black furry hats. James Wilson stood perfectly still at his post. He had been a royal guard for 8 years now. His red uniform was clean and neat. His black shoes shined in the sunlight. Not a single muscle on his face moved. This was what made the Royal Guard special. They never smiled, never blinked too much, and never moved from their spot. Among the crowd was a small boy named Tommy. He was only 7 years old and had come all the way from Australia with his mother. Tommy held a colorful handmade card in his small hands. He had worked on it for hours at their hotel room last night. "Mom, do you think the guard will like my card?" Tommy asked, looking up at his mother with big, hopeful eyes. "Remember what I told you, sweetheart," his mother said gently. "The guards are not allowed to talk or move while they're working." But Tommy still wanted to try. He had made the card specially for any royal guard he would meet. On the front of the card, he had drawn a guard in a red coat standing tall and proud. As they got closer to the palace gates, Tommy's eyes fixed on James. The boy thought the guard looked just like his father from the pictures his mother showed him. Tommy's father had been a soldier too, but he had died in service before Tommy could remember him. The crowd watched as the small boy broke away from his mother's hand and walked slowly toward the guard. People started taking pictures, expecting to see the usual scene of a child trying and failing to make a guard react. "Excuse me, sir," Tommy said, his voice small but clear. "I made this card for you." James continued to stare straight ahead, not moving a muscle, just as he was trained to do. Tommy wasn't discouraged. He stood there patiently. "My daddy was a soldier too," Tommy continued. "Mom says he's in heaven now. She says soldiers are the bravest people in the world." Something changed in James's eyes then. A tiny flicker that only those watching very closely could see. "I drew you on the card," Tommy said, holding it up higher. "Mom says you can't take it, but I wanted you to see it anyway." The crowd fell silent, watching the scene unfold. Tommy's mother stood back, letting her son have this moment, though she knew the guard wouldn't respond. Then something unexpected happened. James Wilson, who had never broken character once in his 8 years of service, slowly looked down at the little boy. The movement was so shocking that several tourists gasped. Even more surprising, James bent down on one knee, coming face to face with Tommy. He took the card from the boy's hands and looked at it carefully. "Thank you, young man," James said in a quiet voice only Tommy could hear. "Your father would be very proud of you, and you're right. Soldiers are brave, but so are the little boys who grow up without their dads." Tommy's face lit up with the biggest smile. James gave him a proper salute before standing back up and returning to his post, still as a statue once more. The crowd burst into applause. Many people wiped tears from their eyes. Tommy ran back to his mother, jumping with excitement. "Mom, he talked to me. He really talked to me," Tommy shouted. James resumed his guard duty, facing forward, expression blank. But the small card was now tucked safely inside his uniform, close to his heart. Videos of the moment spread quickly online. By evening, millions of people around the world had watched the Royal Guard break character for a child's heartfelt gift. But only James knew that when his shift ended, he would take that card home and add it to a special box of treasures that reminded him why his service mattered. Samuel Peterson stood tall and straight outside the palace gates. Today was the Queen's birthday parade. Thousands of people lined the streets of London to watch. Samuel had been a royal guard for 12 years. Not once in those 12 years had he ever broken character during duty. The sun was hot that day. Samuel could feel sweat under his heavy red coat, but his face showed nothing. His eyes looked straight ahead. His body did not move. This was what made him proud, his perfect discipline. The parade was moving along the street now. Horses, soldiers, and bands all marched in perfect lines. The crowd cheered and waved little flags. Children sat on their parents' shoulders to see better. In the crowd stood an elderly woman with white hair. She wore a blue summer dress and held onto a walking stick. Her name was Mrs. Bennet. She was 82 years old and had traveled by train just for this day. Mrs. Bennet had been a primary school teacher for 40 years before she retired. One of her students, many years ago, had been young Samuel Peterson. She remembered him well. A serious boy who always said he wanted to be a Royal Guard someday. When she heard the Queen's birthday parade was happening, Mrs. Bennet decided she must go. She wanted to see if her former student had achieved his dream. She had asked around and learned that Samuel was indeed a Royal Guard now and would be on duty during the parade. The day grew hotter as the morning went on. The crowd packed tighter together as more people arrived. Mrs. Bennet began to feel dizzy from the heat. She tried to reach for her water bottle in her bag, but her hands shook too much. "Oh dear," she whispered to herself, feeling suddenly very weak. The woman next to her was busy taking photos and didn't notice when Mrs. Bennet started to sway. Samuel stood at attention as the parade continued. His eyes were trained to scan the crowd without moving his head. He noticed an elderly woman who seemed to be in trouble. Something about her looked familiar. Then he recognized her, Mrs. Bennet, his teacher from when he was just 10 years old. The woman who had encouraged him to follow his dreams when the other boys had laughed at him. The teacher who had stayed after school to help him read better when he struggled. Mrs. Bennet's face had gone very pale. She was about to fall. Without thinking twice, Samuel broke formation. The other guards looked shocked as he stepped away from his post. The crowd gasped. Royal Guards never moved. Samuel pushed through the crowd quickly but carefully. He reached Mrs. Bennet just as her knees began to give way. With strong arms, he caught her before she could fall to the ground. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, his voice gentle. "It's me, Samuel Peterson, from your class at Oakwood Primary." The elderly woman's eyes cleared for a moment. "Samuel, my goodness, you really did it. You became a Royal Guard just like you said you would." Samuel smiled. "Something Royal Guards never did while on duty." "Yes, Mom. And I still remember how you helped me." Carefully, Samuel helped Mrs. Bennet to a shaded area away from the crowd. He called for medical help and gave her his own water bottle. "You'll get in trouble," Mrs. Bennet worried, looking at his abandoned post. "Some things are more important than rules," Samuel said, staying with her until help arrived. Later that day, Samuel's commanding officer called him in. Samuel stood at attention, expecting to be punished. "Peterson," the officer said sternly, "what you did today broke every rule in our book." "Yes, sir. I understand, sir," Samuel replied. The officer's face softened. It also showed the kind of character we truly value. "The Queen herself saw what happened. She wants to thank you for helping that woman." The next day, newspapers around London carried the story. Royal Guard breaks character to save former teacher. The photo showed Samuel helping Mrs. Bennet, his face full of concern and respect rather than the blank expression guards were famous for. Mrs. Bennet kept that newspaper article in a frame on her wall for the rest of her life. Emma Chen walked slowly through the streets of London. She had come all the way from Singapore. This trip was not for fun. It was to keep a promise to her grandfather. Her grandfather, Li Chen, was 92 years old. He was too sick to travel now. When he was young, during World War II, a British soldier had saved his life. Since then, he had always wanted to thank the Royal Guards who carried on that same proud tradition of service. "Before I die," her grandfather had told her, "I wish I could thank them in person. Since I cannot go, you must go for me, Emma." Emma carried two special things in her bag. One was her grandfather's war medal. The other was a letter he had written himself in shaky handwriting. The letter took him 3 days to write. It was a cloudy day as Emma arrived at Buckingham Palace. She watched the Royal Guards in their red coats and tall black hats. They looked so strong and still, like statues. One guard stood closer to the gate. His name tag read Thompson. Guard Michael Thompson had been standing in the same spot for nearly 2 hours. His face showed no feeling. His eyes looked straight ahead. Emma took a deep breath and walked up to him. She knew the guards were not allowed to talk or move. Still, she had come too far to turn back now. "Excuse me," Emma said politely. "My name is Emma Chen. I've come from Singapore on behalf of my grandfather." Guard Thompson did not move or speak, just as she expected. "My grandfather Li Chen was saved by a British soldier during World War II," Emma continued. She opened her bag and took out the letter. "He wanted to come here himself to thank you, but he is too old and sick now. He asked me to give you his thanks and to read you this letter." People around them stopped to watch. Some took pictures, thinking the guard would ignore her like they always did with tourists. Emma unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. "To the Royal Guards of Britain. I am Li Chen, a simple man from Singapore. In 1943, when I was just a boy of 10, a British soldier named James Wilkins saved me and my family during the war. He risked his life to help strangers from a faraway land. For 79 years, I have carried the memory of his kindness. He wore the same proud uniform that you wear today. He stood for the same values. When I see pictures of the Royal Guards, I see him. I wanted to come and bow before you in respect, but my old body will not allow this journey. So I send my granddaughter with my medal and my thanks. Your tradition of honor has given an old man peace for many years. Thank you for standing strong, not just for Britain, but for all who believe in courage and duty. With deepest respect, Li Chen." When Emma finished reading, the crowd around them was quiet. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. Emma looked up at Guard Thompson. His face was still straight ahead, but something had changed. A single tear rolled down his cheek. It was the only part of him that moved. Then, Guard Michael Thompson did something no one expected. Slowly, he reached out his white-gloved hand. Emma placed her grandfather's medal in it. With great care, the guard took the medal and put it in his uniform pocket, right over his heart. He never spoke. He never fully broke his stance, but that single tear and small movement said everything. The crowd did not cheer or clap. They stood in quiet respect. They knew they had seen something rare and special. Later that day, news of what happened spread quickly. A tourist had recorded the moment on their phone. The video was watched by millions around the world. When Emma returned to Singapore, she showed her grandfather the video. "You see, grandfather, they received your thanks," Emma said softly. The old man watched the screen with tears in his eyes. He touched the guard's face on the screen with a gentle finger. "Now I can go in peace," he whispered. The rain fell hard at Windsor Castle. Dark clouds filled the sky. Water dripped from the tall stone walls. Most tourists had run away to find dry places, but a few brave visitors still walked the grounds under umbrellas. David Collins stood at his guard post, not moving. Rain soaked his red coat. Water ran down his face. His black boots stood in a small puddle. Still, he did not move. Royal Guards never left their post because of weather. David had been a guard for 5 years. He was used to standing still in rain, snow, and hot sun. A small group of people walked slowly toward the castle entrance. In the middle of the group was a girl in a wheelchair. Her name was Lily. She was 9 years old and had been sick with cancer for 2 years. Her hair was gone from the strong medicines she had to take. Lily's mother pushed the wheelchair. Her father walked next to them, holding a big umbrella to keep Lily dry. 2 nurses walked with them too. This trip was Lily's special wish. She had always loved stories about castles and kings and queens. "Look, Mom," Lily said in an excited voice. "There's a real royal guard, just like in my book." Her mother smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. Would you like to go closer to see him?" Lily nodded happily. It was the most excited her parents had seen her in weeks. The cancer treatments made her tired and sad most days. But today, her eyes were bright and wide. Lily's mother pushed the wheelchair toward David's guard post. The rain was still falling, but not as hard now. Lily wore a bright yellow hat with a flower on it to keep her head warm. Her father held the umbrella over them. "He's so still," Lily whispered. "Is he real, Mom?" "Yes, he's real," her mother said. "But royal guards are famous for never moving or talking while they work. It's their special job." David could see the little girl from the corner of his eye. He kept his face straight ahead, as he was trained to do. But he could see that she was sick. He had a niece about the same age. As they got closer, a sudden gust of wind blew across the castle grounds. It caught Lily's yellow hat and lifted it right off her head. The hat flew through the air and landed right at David's feet. Lily's face fell. "My hat," she cried. Her mother started to get up to get it, but stopped when she saw what was happening. David Collins, royal guard who never broke the rules, moved. He bent down in one smooth motion and picked up the yellow hat. He looked at it for a moment, then stepped toward the wheelchair. With gentle hands, he placed the hat back on Lily's head. Then he did something that made everyone gasp. He smiled at her. It was a warm, kind smile that lit up his whole face. "There you go, miss," he said in a soft voice. "Can't have your hat getting all wet, can we?" Lily's face broke into the biggest smile. "Thank you, sir," she said. David gave her a small salute, then walked back to his post. Once there, he returned to his still position, face forward, not moving. Lily clapped her hands with joy. "Mom, Dad, did you see? The guard talked to me. He smiled at me." Her parents had tears in their eyes. They had not seen their daughter so happy in months. "Yes, sweetheart," her father said. "I think you just saw something very special. Not many people get to see a royal guard break character." One of the nurses took a picture at just the right moment. It showed David smiling as he placed the hat on Lily's head. She sent the picture to Lily's doctor back at the hospital. That night, the doctor showed the picture to other sick children. "See this," he told them. "This is Lily at Windsor Castle today. Even royal guards can't stay serious around her." The other children smiled. Some asked if they could visit the castle too. Back at Windsor Castle, David finished his shift in the rain. His commander called him over. "Collins," the commander said, "we saw what you did today with the little girl." David stood straight, ready to accept punishment for breaking the rules. Instead, the commander smiled. "Well done, son. Well done indeed." Royal Guard William Hayes stood perfectly still outside the Tower of London. His red coat was bright in the afternoon sun. His black boots shined. His tall bearskin hat sat straight on his head. William had been a guard for 7 years. He was known for never breaking character, no matter what. Tourists often tried to make him laugh or smile. Some made funny faces. Others told jokes. Children waved their hands in front of his eyes. But William never moved. His face stayed serious. His eyes looked straight ahead. This was his duty, and he did it perfectly. On this bright spring day, a young man named Mark walked nervously toward the guard post. Mark was not a tourist. He lived in London. But today was a very special day for him. In his pocket was a small box with a diamond ring inside. He was going to ask his girlfriend, Sarah, to marry him. Sarah loved everything about British history and tradition. On their first date 3 years ago, they had visited this very spot. Sarah had been fascinated by the royal guards. She told Mark that she thought they were the perfect symbol of loyalty and dedication. "That's how I want our love to be," she had said. "Strong and faithful, no matter what." Mark remembered her words. That's why he had chosen this place for his proposal. Sarah thought they were just going on a normal date to visit the Tower of London again. She had no idea what Mark was planning. As they approached William's guard post, Mark's hands shook. He had never been so nervous in his life. Sarah was busy taking pictures of the tower, not noticing how strange Mark was acting. "Let's go stand near that guard," Mark suggested, his voice higher than normal. "The lighting is better for photos there." Sarah nodded happily and walked with him toward William. Mark had planned everything carefully. He would get down on one knee right next to the guard. It would make a perfect picture for their future wedding album. The moment he proposed with a royal guard standing tall behind them. When they reached the spot, Mark took a deep breath. It was time. "Sarah," he said, taking her hands in his, "these past 3 years have been the happiest of my life." Sarah looked confused at first, then her eyes grew wide as she realized what was happening. Mark got down on one knee. Tourists around them noticed and started pointing and taking pictures. Mark reached into his pocket for the ring box. But his hands were shaking so much that when he pulled out the box, it slipped from his fingers. The small box bounced on the ground and landed right behind Sarah. Sarah turned quickly to see where the box went. She was so surprised that she lost her balance. She began to fall backward, right toward William. Everyone expected the guard to stay still, even if the woman fell against him. That's what royal guards always did. They never broke character. But William saw Sarah falling. In one quick move, he broke his stance and reached out. His strong arms caught Sarah before she could hit the ground. He steadied her carefully. "Thank you," Sarah said, her face red with surprise and embarrassment. William gave her a small nod. Then, to everyone's amazement, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a clean white handkerchief. He handed it to Sarah, who now had happy tears in her eyes. Mark stood frozen, not believing what he was seeing. A royal guard had not only moved but was helping with his proposal. William bent down, picked up the ring box, and handed it to Mark. Then he looked at Sarah and gave her a small wink before returning to his post and his serious stance. The crowd around them burst into applause. Mark, finding his courage again, opened the box and held up the ring. "Sarah, will you marry me?" he asked. "Yes," Sarah cried, throwing her arms around him. "Yes, yes, yes." As the happy couple hugged and kissed, William stood straight and still again, as if nothing had happened. But the smallest smile stayed on his lips for just a moment. Later that day, videos of the guard helping with the proposal went viral online. Millions of people watched the royal guard break character to save a special moment. 1 year later, William received a wedding invitation in the mail, and in Mark and Sarah's wedding photos, standing tall beside them, as a special guest, was a royal guard named William Hayes. Rebecca Johnson was tired but happy. After working 16 hours straight at the city hospital, she was finally going home. Rebecca was a nurse who had worked very hard during the recent health crisis. She had saved many lives. Today, a special thing was happening. Rebecca's coworkers had planned a small surprise for her outside street, James's Palace. They wanted to thank her for all her hard work. Rebecca didn't know about their plan. She thought they were just going for a walk before heading home. Guard Thomas Baker stood at his post outside the palace gates. His face showed no emotion. His body did not move. Thomas had been a guard for 4 years. He took his job very seriously. His mother had taught him that whatever job you do, you should do it with all your heart. A group of about 20 people walked toward the palace. Most wore nurse uniforms or doctor coats. In the middle was Rebecca, looking confused. "Why are we stopping here?" she asked her friends. Her head nurse, Mrs. Clark, smiled and took a small box from her bag. "Rebecca, we brought you here for a reason." The group formed a circle around Rebecca. Thomas could hear everything from his post, though he kept looking straight ahead as he was trained to do. "Rebecca Johnson," Mrs. Clark said in a loud, clear voice, "for the past 6 months, you have worked harder than anyone. You stayed extra hours. You held the hands of scared patients. You never complained, even when you were tired." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. She had not expected this. "We wanted to give you this small gift," Mrs. Clark continued, opening the box to show a beautiful silver pin shaped like an angel. "It's the Angel of Mercy Award. Only 5 nurses in our hospital's history have ever received it." The other nurses and doctors clapped. Some people walking by stopped to watch. "I was just doing my job," Rebecca said quietly, like everyone else. As Mrs. Clark pinned the angel to Rebecca's uniform, Thomas listened carefully. Every word reminded him of his sister, Amy. Last year, Amy had been very sick in the hospital. The nurses there had saved her life. They had been so kind, staying with her day and night. One nurse had been especially caring. Thomas never forgot her kindness. Mrs. Clark finished her speech. "Rebecca, you represent the very best of what a nurse should be. Your kindness, your skill, and your big heart have made a difference to so many people." Just as the small ceremony was ending, something unexpected happened. Thomas Baker, the royal guard who never moved, suddenly stepped away from his post. The crowd gasped. Royal guards never broke character. Thomas walked 3 steps forward. He stopped in front of Rebecca. Then, in one smooth motion, he gave her a perfect, formal salute. His face was serious and full of respect. The nurses and doctors fell silent. Rebecca stood frozen, not believing what she was seeing. After holding his salute for 5 seconds, Thomas turned and walked back to his post. He resumed his guard stance as if nothing had happened. "What just happened?" Rebecca whispered. An older security guard who worked at the palace came over to the group. "That's Thomas Baker," he explained. "His sister was saved by nurses last year during the crisis. She was at your hospital, I believe." Suddenly Rebecca remembered. Amy Baker, room 304. She had the same eyes as him. The security guard nodded. "What you just saw never happens. A royal guard breaking protocol." That was his way of saying thank you. Rebecca walked slowly toward Thomas. He stared straight ahead, back in character now. She stood in front of him and whispered, "Amy sends you a letter every month. She tells us how well she's doing. She's back in school now." Thomas didn't move, but a single tear rolled down his cheek. The photo of Thomas saluting Rebecca appeared in the evening news. The story spread quickly. Royal Guard breaks character to honor nurse. People all over the country were touched by this simple act of gratitude. The palace never officially commented on what happened. But the next day, a beautiful bouquet of flowers arrived at the hospital. The card simply read, "To all the angels in white." Winter came early to London that year. The cold wind blew hard through the streets. Snow fell in big white flakes. Most people stayed inside their warm homes. Guard Jonathan Miller stood at his post near Buckingham Palace. His red coat helped a little against the cold, but his hands and feet were freezing. Still, he did not move. He did not rub his hands together for warmth. He did not stamp his feet on the ground. Royal guards never showed discomfort. Jonathan had been a guard for 3 years. Before that, he had served in the army. He knew what it meant to be cold and hungry. He knew how to stand strong even when his body wanted to give up. The tourists were few today because of the bad weather. Only a handful of people walked by, wrapped in heavy coats and scarves. Jonathan stood alone most of the morning, the snow piling up around his black boots. Around noon, Jonathan noticed a man sitting on a bench not far from his post. The man wore thin, torn clothes. He had no gloves, no proper winter coat, no hat on his gray head. He was shivering badly. Jonathan recognized him. This was George, a homeless man who often stayed in this area. Jonathan had seen him many times before during his shifts. Sometimes people gave George food or money. Sometimes they just walked past without looking at him. Today, no one was around to help George. The wind grew stronger. The snow fell harder. George's lips were turning blue from the cold. He wrapped his arms around himself, trying to stay warm. Jonathan knew the rules. Royal guards must never leave their post. They must never break character. They must stand still, no matter what happens around them. These rules were very strict. But as Jonathan watched George shivering on the bench, something inside him changed. The wind blew a strong gust that hit George hard. The old man curled up even tighter, his whole body shaking now. Jonathan looked around. No tourists were watching. No supervisors were nearby. Slowly, very slowly, he moved from his post. He took 3 steps to the left, positioning himself between George and the wind. His tall body now blocked the worst of the cold air from hitting the homeless man. It wasn't much, but it was something. Jonathan returned to his guard stance, standing perfectly still. But now he stood where his body could shield George from the harsh wind. George noticed what had happened. He looked up at the tall guard who had moved to protect him. Their eyes met for just a moment. George gave a small nod of thanks. Jonathan's expression didn't change, but his eyes showed kindness. For 2 hours, Jonathan stayed in this new position, breaking the rules to help someone in need. When his shift ended and another guard came to replace him, Jonathan walked away quickly. But he didn't go home. Instead, he went to a nearby cafe. He bought hot soup and coffee. He purchased a warm blanket from a shop. Then, now dressed in normal clothes instead of his guard uniform, Jonathan returned to the bench where George still sat. "Excuse me," Jonathan said, holding out the food and blanket. "I thought you might need these." George looked up in surprise. At first, he didn't recognize Jonathan without the red coat and tall black hat. Then his eyes widened. "You're the guard," George said softly. "The one who blocked the wind for me." Jonathan smiled. "I'm just a person who doesn't like to see another person suffer." A woman walking by saw this moment. She took a picture with her phone. Later, she posted it online with the words, "Royal Guard off duty brings food to homeless man he protected during his shift." The picture spread quickly across the internet. Thousands of people shared it. Many wrote comments about how moved they were. When Jonathan's commanders saw the picture, they called him to their office. Jonathan thought he would be punished for breaking the rules while on duty. Miller, his commander, said seriously, "What you did was against protocol." "Yes, sir," Jonathan replied. "I understand, sir." The commander was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "My father was homeless for a time, before he got back on his feet. Someone helped him too." He held out his hand to Jonathan. "Well done, son. Well done." A week later, George was no longer on the bench. Jonathan discovered that a local shelter had found him a warm place to stay for the winter and help finding a job. Sometimes kindness creates more kindness. It was a very important day at Buckingham Palace. Foreign leaders from many countries were visiting. Security was extra tight. Everyone was on high alert. Guard Stephen Lewis stood at his post near the main entrance. He was one of the best royal guards, with 9 years of service. His uniform was perfect. His posture was straight. His face showed no expression at all. Stephen had been chosen for this special duty because he never made mistakes. He never broke character. His commanders trusted him completely. Police officers and security agents walked around the area, checking everything. They spoke into their radios, making sure the palace was safe for the important visitors. Across the street, a young woman named Maria struggled with a twin baby stroller. She looked very tired. The 2 babies inside the stroller were crying loudly. Maria also carried 3 heavy shopping bags. "Shay, it's okay," she said to her babies. "We'll be home soon." Maria hadn't planned to be near the palace today. She had just gone shopping for baby supplies, but her normal road home was blocked because of the special event. Now she had to take the long way around, past the palace. As Maria crossed the street, one of her shopping bags broke. Baby clothes, diapers, and bottles fell all over the ground. One of the twins started crying even louder. The other one tried to climb out of the stroller. "Oh no," Maria cried. She tried to hold the stroller steady with one hand while picking up her things with the other. It wasn't working. More items fell. The babies cried harder. People walked past, too busy to help. Security officers watched her but didn't move. They had been told not to leave their positions for any reason today. Stephen saw everything from his post. He knew the rules. Today of all days, he must not move. He must not break character. The rules were very clear. But as he watched Maria struggle, something clicked in his mind. He recognized her. Maria wasn't just any young mother. She was the widow of Daniel Wilson, who had served with Stephen in the military years ago. Daniel had died while saving Stephen's life during a mission. Before Stephen could think twice, he stepped away from his post. Several tourists gasped. Security officers looked at him in surprise. "Let me help you, Mrs. Wilson," Stephen said, walking quickly to Maria's side. Maria looked up, shocked to see a royal guard coming to help her. "How do you know my name?" Stephen knelt down and began picking up the fallen items. "I served with Daniel. He was my friend. He saved my life." Tears filled Maria's eyes. "Daniel always spoke highly of you." Stephen gathered all the items and placed them in his own uniform jacket, making a safe bundle. He gently pushed the twins' hands back into the stroller and fixed their blankets. "I can carry these for you," he said. "Where are you headed?" "Just 3 blocks that way," Maria pointed. "But you can't leave your post, can you?" Stephen looked back at his empty guard position. His commander was walking toward them, looking very serious. "Some duties are more important than others," Stephen said simply. His commander reached them. Stephen stood straight, ready to accept punishment. "Sir, I recognize this woman. She's the widow of Daniel Wilson, who died saving many of us, including me. I request permission to escort her home safely." The commander looked at Maria and the crying babies. His strict face softened. He had also known Daniel Wilson. "5 minutes, Lewis," he said quietly. "I'll cover your post." 5 minutes. "Thank you, sir," Stephen replied. As Stephen helped Maria with her stroller and packages, a news photographer captured the moment. The picture showed a royal guard in full uniform pushing a baby stroller, with a grateful mother walking beside him. The palace never officially commented on the incident, but when asked about it later, Stephen's commander said only, "The royal guards protect the crown, but they also honor those who gave everything for their country. Some duties go beyond the uniform." The story spread around the world. Many people wrote letters thanking Stephen for showing that behind every uniform is a person who understands that some promises, like those to fallen comrades, last forever. The changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace always drew big crowds. Hundreds of people gathered to watch this famous ceremony. Tourists took pictures. Children sat on their parents' shoulders to see better. Guard Captain Richard Anderson led his unit with pride. At 35 years old, he had served as a royal guard for 15 years. Today he would lead the ceremony. His uniform was perfect. His steps were exact. His face showed no emotion. Richard had trained his men well. They marched in perfect time. Their faces were serious. Each movement was done exactly right. This was a show of discipline that people came from all over the world to see. Among the crowd that day was an elderly man in a wheelchair. His name was James Harrison. He was 92 years old. James wore a blue blazer with military medals pinned to his chest. These medals were from his service in World War II. 60 years ago, James had come to the palace with his grandson, who pushed his wheelchair. It had been James's wish to see the changing of the guard one more time before he died. "I was one of them, you know," James told the tourist standing next to him. "A royal guard. That was many years ago, before most of you were born." The tourist smiled politely but didn't really believe the old man. Many people claimed special connections to the palace. As the ceremony began, James sat up straight in his wheelchair. He watched with tears in his eyes as the guards marched in perfect formation. This brought back so many memories for him. "Grandpa, are you okay?" his grandson asked, noticing the tears. "Yes, son," James said, "just remembering my days in that uniform. The proudest time of my life." The ceremony continued. Richard led his unit through each step perfectly. The crowd watched in silence, impressed by the guard's discipline. Then something unexpected happened. As James watched the ceremony, he slowly began to push himself up from his wheelchair. His grandson tried to stop him. "Grandpa, what are you doing? You can't stand on your own." But James was determined. "I will stand for them," he said. It's a sign of respect. With great effort and pain, the old man managed to stand. His legs shook badly. His face showed how hard this was for him. But he stood tall and gave a perfect military salute to the passing guards. Richard, who was leading the unit, noticed the elderly man from the corner of his eye. He saw the World War II medals. He saw how the man was struggling to stand. He saw the perfect salute. Royal Guards never break formation during the changing of the guard. They never change their marching path. They never acknowledge the crowd. These were the strictest rules of all. But Richard made a quick decision. Without saying a word, he made a small hand signal to his unit. As they marched past the elderly man, each guard turned their eyes slightly toward him, breaking the rule of looking straight ahead. Then, as they passed directly in front of James, Richard called out a special command, and the entire unit gave a formal salute to the old guard. The crowd gasped. This had never happened before. When the ceremony ended, Richard walked directly to where James now sat back in his wheelchair. The captain stood tall in front of the elderly man and saluted him again. "Guard Harrison," Richard said formally. "Thank you for your service, sir." James looked up in surprise. "You know who I am?" Richard smiled. "Your picture still hangs in our training hall. You saved 3 of your fellow guards during the London bombings in 1943. We all know your name." The old man's eyes filled with tears again. "I was just doing my duty," he said. "As were we today," Richard replied. "Some traditions are about more than just ceremony. They're about honoring those who came before us." People nearby heard this exchange. Soon everyone was taking pictures of the captain, talking with the elderly former guard. The story spread quickly through the crowd. That evening, news programs showed the video of the Royal Guards saluting James. The palace released a short statement. Today's ceremony included a special recognition of former guard James Harrison, whose bravery and service reminds us all of the true meaning of duty. For Richard and his unit, breaking character that day wasn't breaking tradition at all. It was honoring its deepest meaning.